It wasn't long after The Shepherd of the Hills hit shelves in 1907 that people from all across the country, even the world, came here to the Ozarks to explore. As Caitlin McConnell with Ozarks Alive writes, many were taken on a journey with Pearl Spurlock. Caitlin joins us now to tell us more about Pearl and the path that she took visitors on in the Branson area. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with, who is Pearl Spurlock?
Well, you know, Pearl is a really interesting character. I first discovered her a few years ago when I read a book that she wrote called Over the Old Ozark Trail, if I remember that exactly correctly. And it was kind of a transcription of this route that she would take tourists on when they visited the Shepherd of the Hills country, as they called it back then. And it was just fascinating. You know, it's written in first person. She goes through and kind of illustrates all the stops that she took people to and showed what they showed them. And it was just really a cool window into this entrepreneur, this female entrepreneur at the early 1900s, who really made a huge difference in promoting Branson and that area to the rest of the world.
And so she was really well known as a travel guide, so to speak, a taxi cab driver as well. She also had a role in keeping many of the Shepherd of the Hills traditions alive.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I think, it's hard to imagine what things were like at the turn, she wasn't there quite at the beginning, that 1906 to 1907 time frame, but not that long after that. It's hard to imagine what life was like back then. But from what I've been told and understand, she would kind of meet tourists when they showed up, via train, and would help, say that she'd show them around and take them different places. And so they probably, weren't planning much in advance. They got here and then kind of connected once they arrived. But everybody, from what I've heard, she was very memorable and, was kind of a built-in promoter for the different tourist attractions that were here, because she would make all these different stops, whether it was at Old Matt's Cabin as we know it today, or what was known as Fairy Cave, which is Talking Rocks today. And so the people who owned those places also, I'm sure were grateful for her bringing people to them, because they got built-in customers that she would bring around.
About how many times a year did she take people on tours?
I don't know of a figure. I think it wasn't a one-day thing, at least from what I understand. It was kind of like, you were with her for a couple of days, because, you imagine too how bad the roads were back then. It wasn't where you could buzz around like we would today and see all these places. It took a lot more time. And so I think, there was a handful of different places she visited, a couple of days at a time. So if you're thinking that, presumably not during really bad weather or off seasons, at least maybe 100 a year? More than that, maybe? I'm not quite sure, but a lot.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, that rough, rugged terrain from back in the day, and she got into a car accident in 1930. That really actually kind of showed how well she was known throughout the region when that happened. Yeah,
she got a lot of publicity in newspapers after being kind of sidelined by this accident that she was in, but it didn't stop her. She got back to it, and there was even more publicity after she got remarried at one point. And they had articles about, her parking her taxi long enough to get married, but that, they made special note that she wasn't going to let her marriage interfere with her business either. She was going to go back to driving that taxi.
What else was she recognized for in her life?
I think most of the things I know of her tie her to the Shepherd of the Hills country and promotion of that. Something else that she did, in addition to taking tourists around, was actually helping lead the way to raise money to help mark the graves of some of the really well-known people, not necessarily specific characters in the book, but who were tied in large part to parts of Shepherd of the Hills. And so that was something, even today, you can go down to one of the cemeteries and see some of the monuments that she helped raise money for, and really, memorialize those people, obviously far beyond her lifetime.
And she actually is very near Branson, I understand.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, very cool. And this whole story is found on OzarksAlive.com. You also found some old pictures of her, too.
They're awesome. I love the ones of her with her car. I think those are really fun.
Yeah, and you can kind of just get a feel for, what she was driving through back in the 1930s, too. Just a really neat story about Pearl Spurlock here in the Ozarks. Thanks so much for sharing that with us, Caitlin.
Oh, thank you.
And one thing I do want to close with something that you said in your article, too. It said, however, while unique, that legacy isn't as a taxi driver. It really is as an Ozarks ambassador. And just what a neat story to share.
Thank you.
All right, we will be right back with more Ozarks tonight. We'll also link Caitlin's website, OzarksAlive.com, on our website, too. We'll be right back.